He said, "You're not Charles. I don't know who you are, what you did with Charles, but I can murder you now."
We're gathering together as saints, as brothers and sisters, and preparing for the second coming of Christ.
This is Lori Vallow Daybell. In 2018, she met her fifth husband, Lled Daybell. A year later, they killed her children, her ex-husband, and his ex-wife. And then they went on vacation. Then she made silly jokes with the police.
How long have you lived here?
Like 3 weeks.
Oh, geez. Yeah, okay.
That's why the neighbors don't know us.
Gotcha.
Like, hi neighbor, sorry.
Yeah, I know. Very creepy. Let's explore how Lori Vallow went from a beauty queen who always talked about how much she loved her kids to a doomsday cult fanatic who happily took her youngest children's lives. But before we go on, I must warn you. Today, we'll discuss violence, murder, and extreme violence toward children. This is your chance to turn back. Today's case will take us from the southern United States all the way up to Idaho. But before we get to chilly Rexburg, let's begin in sunny San Bernardino, California. Lori Noreen Cox was born to Barry and Janice on June 26, 1973, but she grew up in a family way larger than three. Lori had three sisters, Stacy, Laura, and Summer, and her two brothers, Alex and Ada. Her family had deep roots in the Church of Latter-day Saints. Growing up in a time when marriage and kids was the norm, Lori began her own family pretty early on. When she was 19, she married her high school boyfriend, Nelson. But within a year, they were divorced. 2 years later, she married her second husband, William. Together, they had a son, Colby Ryan, born in 1996. 2 years later, once more, the couple would break up. In 2001, Lori married her third husband, Joseph Ryan. On September 24, 2002, Tylee Ryan was born, Joseph's first child and Lori's first daughter. But lo and behold, by 2004, Lori would divorce Joseph too. But 3 divorces by the age of 30 wouldn't faze Lori. She would marry twice more. And it would only get messier. Lori had confided in her brother Alex that Joseph had been abusive to her, so Alex set out to punish Joseph. He was arrested and sentenced to 3 months in prison after he tased Joseph and threatened to kill him. As you're about to find out, Lori had a very strange relationship with Alex. He was the eldest brother of the Cox family, and when they were kids, he was often in charge of the house, while the parents would be on weeks-long vacations in Hawaii. Then, when Lori was in junior high, she told a friend that Alex wanted to have sex with her. While it's unclear if that happened or not, Alex remained obsessed with his little sister, even into his 40s and 50s. He was extremely overprotective of her. But by then, Lori encouraged him to be so. In 2004, between her third and fourth husband, Lori participated in the Miss Texas beauty pageant. She had won the Mrs. Hayes County pageant, and she was now obsessed with becoming Miss America. She was now working as a hairstylist and taking care of her daughter, Tylee. Her son, Colby, had stayed with his dad. Lori made it to the top 15 semi-finalists. When the judge asked her, "What makes you tick?" she replied, "Being a good mom is very important to me, and a good wife and a good worker. And being all of those things together isn't easy, so basically, I'm a ticking time bomb." Well, she was a ticking time bomb in the middle of an acrimonious divorce, and this is nothing compared to what would happen next. In late 2005, Lori met Charles Vallow, and as the devout Mormon that she was, she soon married him on February 24, 2006. Charles also came from a large Mormon family, but he was nowhere near as devout as Lori. However, he cared a lot about family values and staying close to his children. He had 2 sons from a previous marriage, Nicholas and Zachary. And when Lori came to live with him in Arizona, there were 4 kids in the house: Nick, Zach, Tylee, and Colby, who would divide his time between Lori's and his dad's. But remember how Lori would be left alone with her siblings as her parents went on long holidays? Well, she would do the same to her kids. Charles would often be away on business trips, and Lori would leave the house and spend days on end with her family and friends. This meant Charles's sons, Nick and Zach, were left in charge of Colby and Tylee. And in 2014, things would get even more complicated. Lori and Charles decided to adopt Charles's grandnephew, Joshua Jackson, or as everyone called him, JJ. JJ was adopted in 2014. That year, however, both Charles's sons and Lori's son Colby moved out of the house. It was now down to the parents to raise Tylee and JJ. Tylee adored JJ. She was born in 2002 and JJ was born in 2012, so there was a whole decade between them. And Tylee felt almost like a mother to him.
Are you taking a video of my child?
Your child?
My.
Tylee's friends loved to see them together. Tylee was extremely mature, almost more mature and child-oriented than her own mom.
I loved being around JJ and Tylee. Tylee was really protective over JJ, and she was kind of like another mama to him. JJ, say hi.
Sit down. Happy.
Tylee was so happy, and so was JJ. Sadly, Lori was deeply unhappy, and she would develop an obsession that would kill them both. In December 2014, the Vallow family moved to Hawaii. Lori and Charles tried a fresh start by opening a juice bar, Juice Island. Judging by Lori's social media, you would say she adored spending time with her kids, especially her daughter Tylee. They were always smiling, walking, jogging, and enjoying the natural splendor of the islands. But this would only last 2 years. Lori and Charles's business failed dramatically, and they saw no other choice but to move back to Arizona. Along with this move, Lori's fourth marriage would also come to an end, but the end would be much more dramatic than those before. You see, with every husband, Lori became more Mormon, but by the time she was with Charles, her religion was slowly turning to a cult. When the couple got back to Arizona, Lori was now obsessed with a series of books written by lled Daybell. Chad became sort of a role model to Lori, someone who she believed spoke the truth. But wait until you hear what she believed. In October 2018, Lori's friend, knowing of her new obsession, took her to a religious event where Chad was speaking.
Ready to Preparing a People Conference announcement with lled Daybell, one of our main speakers.
When Chad and Lori started talking, sparks started flying. And Chad, well, he told her they had been married in 7 previous lifetimes. Talk about cheesy pickup lines. Somehow, Lori fell for it, and she also believed him. Chad was born in 1968, 3 years older than Lori, but a whole 12 years younger than Charles. He grew up in Utah and married his high school girlfriend Tammy, with whom he had 5 children. He worked as a gravedigger before opening his own book company, Spring Creek Books. And after proclaiming that God spoke to him, he moved to Rexburg, Idaho, simply following his orders, he said. Also following God's orders, Chad had been hitting on married women, aka Lori. But this was masked by his strange beliefs, which seemed to fascinate Lori. Chad put all people into 2 categories, light and dark. Of course, when he said someone was dark, he meant that they were a follower of Satan. Chad told Lori that she was an eternal being, having been on this earth for 22 lives. And just like him, she had been on planet Earth for 5 previous lives. And incredibly, in all their lives, they were married. Chad even sent Lori a detailed email analyzing her whole family, putting them in dark or light and determining their level. By the end of 2016, Lori was a fierce devotee of Chad, and she was also in love with him. She began referring to dark people as zombies, and she didn't really seem to care about her family anymore. After all, she was an eternal spirit that was going to lead the 144,000, the group with special protection from God himself. Why would such a special person bother with cleaning the house or taking care of the children? On January 31st, 2017, Charles returned home after a week-long business trip. He was a little worried. For the last 2 days, he hadn't gotten through to Lori, Tylee, or JJ. When he arrived at the airport, he went to take his truck home, but the truck was missing. He took a taxi home only to discover the locks had been changed and all his clothes were in the trash. That's not all. $35,000 were also missing from his account. That night, Charles called the police.
So what's going on tonight?
I don't know how to say it. We're LDS. She thinks she's a resurrected being and a God, and remember the 144,000. Jesus is coming next year. She took all the money out of her bank account today. My truck has gone from the airport. She went to the airport and got it. I just flew in from Houston, from Dallas.
When they entered the garage, they noticed all the family cars had disappeared, along with several valuables. Charles even told the police that Lori had threatened to kill him.
She said, "You're not Charles. I don't know who you are, what you did with Charles, but I can murder you now."
Guess what? The police did nothing. They even criticized Charles for wasting their time. Charles filed for divorce while Lori was AWOL for 58 days. Lori had stayed with Tylee in Hawaii until April when they returned to Arizona. This was the start of a murderous rampage. On July 11th, 2019, the police received a disturbing call.
911, where is your emergency?
I'm in police in an ambulance.
What's the emergency there?
I got in a fight with my brother-in-law and I shot him in self-defense.
And is he hurt or did he fly?
Yeah, there's blood. He's not moving.
How long ago did this happen?
A couple of minutes.
What's his name, your brother-in-law?
Charles Vallow.
Okay, what part of his body is injured?
In the chest.
I'm sorry, where?
In the chest.
Is he awake and responsive or unconscious?
Unconscious.
Is he breathing?
I can't tell.
Are you willing to go over to him and check?
Sure.
The caller was none other than Alex Cox, Lori's creepy brother. And when the police arrived at the residence, they discovered Charles's body lying in a pool of blood in the living room. The house was empty, bar Charles's lifeless body. Outside, Alex told the police the following story. He and Tylee were waiting at the house when Lori was taking JJ to school. That's when Charles arrived at the house in an aggressive mood. Tylee went to grab the baseball bat, but when she came back with it, Charles grabbed it from her hand and hit Alex on the head with it. So Alex took out his gun and shot Charles multiple times in the chest. But Alex seemed fine. No injuries were visible on his head. When the police looked closer, he had a very tiny mark, almost as if it was self-inflicted. Charles was a semi-pro baseball player. If he'd hit Alex with the baseball bat, Alex could have died. But Charles was also a very peaceful person. He had zero history of getting in physical altercations. And behind the house, Lori and Tylee were chilling.
How long have you lived here?
Like 3 weeks.
Oh, geez. Yeah, okay.
So the neighbors don't listen.
Gotcha.
Like, hi neighbor, sorry.
If the police are looking at a homicide, maybe try to look devastated? Just saying. What's more, Lori threw a massive pool party on the same day that her ex-husband was killed, inside the same house. Honestly, who does that? That same day, Alex was released from custody. The police were somehow pleased with the self-defense shooting theory. On the following day, Lori sent a text to Charles's sons. A text? With news like this? A couple of days later, Lori, Tylee, and JJ moved in with Chad in Rexburg, Idaho, and creepy Alex followed them there. On September 8th, 2019, Lori, Alex, and her 2 kids went to Yellowstone National Park. The following day, JJ started school, but Tylee was nowhere to be found. In fact, the last time anyone saw her was before she went on the Yellowstone trip. On September 17th, JJ was seen outside his Rexburg home, playing with a slightly older friend. After this, JJ seemed to vanish. A couple of days later, Lori went to unenroll him from school. She claimed that she decided to homeschool JJ. No one would ever see the children again. For a few days, no one worried. The family was now in Rexburg, and their extended family assumed they were just getting accustomed to the move. But as the days turned to weeks, JJ's grandparents and Tylee's dad became more and more anxious. Lori wouldn't return their calls, but she would respond with text messages saying the kids were fine and away. Yeah. Every time someone would contact her, she would claim that JJ was with her friend in Arizona and Tylee was at a friend's house, and so on. They were never with her. By November 2019, the kids had been missing for 2 months, and this was the main news in Idaho.
People were interested in the story right from the beginning. We don't normally get missing kids news releases that are like this, and it just continued to get bigger and bigger.
And the main reason was Lori's full uncooperation.
Typically when a missing person is reported, it's the parents that call us. And so when we posted this story, I think people immediately knew that something was fishy.
By November, the FBI got involved, and the case started making national headlines. JJ's grandparents, Larry and Kay, were very involved and concerned.
He was our baby from, just instant fall in love. That's what you do with grandkids. You just fall in love immediately.
JJ was born prematurely, weighing just over 2 pounds, and he was on the autistic spectrum, which meant that he needed special education. His grandparents had stayed very close to him throughout his childhood. But after Charles's death, Lori cut off all communication with them. And even when they begged her to give them 1 hour of Skype time with their grandson, she ignored them. Apparently, Lori was upset that Charles had switched his life insurance beneficiary from Lori to his sister, Kay. It's funny, Lori was upset after she and Alex killed Kay's brother. In late 2016, Kay called the police in Chandler, Arizona to do a welfare check on JJ. That's when the police tracked JJ's family to Idaho. Lori was now living with Chad, but her brother Alex and her niece Melanie were also living in neighboring apartments. When the police spoke to Lori that day, she claimed her kids were both in Arizona.
You're alone, or is that help?
My brother's here.
So JJ would be where?
He's in Arizona.
Who's he with in Arizona?
She's with one of my friends in Arizona.
She also claimed that Tylee was away at college, even though Tylee had never finished high school. Then she complained about Charles's life insurance, completely unprompted. The same day, the police met with Chad. He babbled something about not knowing Lori's phone number. The police decided to get a search warrant for their home. But when they got to the house the next day, Lori and Chad were gone.
There was food in the refrigerator, food in the pantry. Everything had been taken off the hangers, and there was no clothes in the dresser drawers.
Lori's cell phone went straight to voicemail, and Chad never returned any phone calls from the police. When the detectives checked the information Lori had given them about her kids, they discovered it was all lies. Tylee had never enrolled to go to college or school for that matter, ever since their move to Idaho in August 2019. And Melanie, Lori's friend who reportedly took care of JJ, was only covering for Lori.
She told me that the police had been there asking for JJ, and that she told the police that I had JJ, that I was at a movie called Frozen.
All of her alibis were turning to ashes, but Lori had vanished. Now all her family was pleading for her to reveal the location of Tylee and JJ, even her own son, Colby Ryan.
I'm your son. I would never want anything to happen to you, and I would never want anything to happen to Tylee and JJ ever. I know you know the right thing to do is, and I know that you have a good heart, so I know that it's time to do the right thing.
But Lori was far away from doing the right thing. Now she'd married Chad, her 5th husband, and she was living the good life in Hawaii. By Christmas 2019, the media tracked the couple to Hawaii.
Did you do something to your children? Are your children still alive? That's a simple question. I've got 3 kids of my own. I can tell you every minute where my kids are at. Where are your children? Listen, just tell people what's happening. There's people around the country praying for your children, praying for you guys. Why don't you give us answers?
That's great.
That's great. That's great that they're praying for you, praying for your kids. What? You have nothing to say?
It's infuriating to watch how Tylee and JJ's mom cared less about them than virtually the whole country. Of course, the police got their hands on this video and decided to finally take more serious action. They filed a child protection order.
It instructed her to bring her minor children to the Rexburg Police Department or the Department of Health and Welfare within 5 days of being served.
After 5 days of Lori ignoring the order, she was arrested. Chad sat at her first court hearing just a few rows behind, really focused on what his wife was telling the judge. Outside the courtroom, Lori's extended family was growing ever more outraged at her lack of answers about Tylee and JJ.
This is not about Lori. Guys, this is Lori telling us where those 2 kids are.
At this point, it had been a couple months since anyone had seen JJ and Tylee, and it didn't look like their parents cared. and she wasn't willing to say anything.
With Lori in custody, the police were now investigating Charles's death too. Remember how cool Alex and Lori were, and how Lori threw a party on the same day Charles was killed inside her home?
That was the most bull story that I have ever heard in my life. That was a setup, a absolute setup murder for hire.
And as the detectives were digging through suspicious stories, in came another one. Chad's ex-wife Tammy had just died under suspicious circumstances.
Suddenly, Tammy Daybell, Chad's first wife, passes away in her sleep. Now, this is a 49-year-old woman. She's an avid runner, and according to her friends and family, was in good health, seemed to be in good spirits around the time of her death, which really raised a lot of eyebrows.
Chad and Tammy had been married for 28 years, until Lori came along. When the detectives spoke to Chad's friends and family, they discovered that over the previous months, he kept saying he had visions of his wife dying. When the police asked him if he wanted an autopsy performed, he declined. And at Tammy's funeral, he behaved pretty strangely.
He recited many things that were not asked for concerning the details of her death. He told us what happened to her that morning. He told us that she had since been to visit him and is helping him set affairs in order, giving him direction on how to handle certain children in their future.
What's more, Chad was upbeat and jolly throughout the whole funeral. He also left early, which for a husband of almost 3 decades seemed pretty strange to everyone. And 10 days later, he eloped to Hawaii with his new love, Lori. On November 5th, 2019, they got married. As the police were closing in on arresting Chad too, they discovered a phone call between him and Lori's friend, Melanie.
Tammy had been getting weaker and sick. I begged her to go to the doctor. Her heart was failing her. She was physically falling apart. She hates doctors, so she just passed away.
Here's where it gets even creepier. 17 days before Tammy's death, Lori used Charles's credit card to order matching wedding rings for her and Chad. So this was premeditated, but Chad's whole selling point was that he had visions.
In the LDS faith, it is accepted for a person to have visions, and Chad was known for his sixth sense of things that may come or may not come. It was a way really for him to connect with other like-minded members of the Mormon Church to join together with him and share this common special ground.
So Chad was adamant he knew his wife would die, as he told all his concerned friends. And the detectives would discover that Lori had also become a part of his religion/cult over the last year. They would appear together in podcasts, discussing how they should prepare for the apocalypse and how they were special people, part of the 144,000.
We're gathering together as saints, as brothers and sisters, and preparing for the second coming of Christ.
But how do you get from doomsday cults to killing your whole family? The detectives were still nowhere near the location of Tylee and JJ, but as they were digging through Lori's history, they discovered a sad truth. Charles had warned the police many times about Lori and even confessed he was scared for his life.
She said, "You're not Charles. I don't know who you are, what you did with Charles, but I can murder you now." I've tried to support her as much as I could, but it's gotten really, really bad. Lately, she's had a break. She says, "I'm Nick Schneider. I've taken over Charles's body, and Charles has been killed. I'm going to kill you. You're going to be murdered today or tomorrow. I can do it. I'm not going to get my priesthood power. She has priesthood blessing."
The police had many chances to intervene and perhaps even save Charles's life, but at the time, they didn't take his pleas seriously enough. In March 2020, 6 months after Tylee and JJ's disappearance, the FBI asked people in Idaho to send any pictures of them that they had the day the kids vanished. They discovered that Alex Cox was there on both days, September 8th and 22nd.
He was staying with Alex, and Alex brought him home and carried him to bed.
Melanie and her husband David stayed at Lori's home that night. The next morning, Alex and JJ were gone.
She said that he was being a zombie and climbed up on the cabinets climbed up on top of the fridge, smashed her picture of Christ down, and then climbed up onto the upper cabinet.
That's called a 7-year-old on the autistic spectrum, not a zombie. But Lori claimed her son was a zombie, so Alex had to take him away. Then remember Melanie, Lori's niece, who had come to stay in a neighboring apartment in Rexburg? She was about to divorce her husband, Brandon, when Brandon was almost killed in his car. The shooter's car was registered to Charles Vallow, who was already dead at this point. Brandon said he was almost certain Alex Cox was driving the car.
He knew that Alex Cox was kind of the family hitman, and he just fairly quickly came to the conclusion that it was Alex Cox.
Around the same time, Lori and an unidentified man were seen loading a storage unit in Idaho. And 10 days before Tammy died, she posted something very distressing on Facebook. Someone also shot at her in the driveway and tried to kill her. Was Alex doing Lori's darkest bidding, trying to kill her entire family? On December 12th, there was a huge plot twist. The police were just getting an arrest warrant ready for Alex Cox when a family friend called to say he'd just died in his bathroom.
Hi, I need an ambulance. I have a older male here named Alex. He just passed out here on my bathroom.
Alex died of a pulmonary embolism on the same day that the police exhumed Tammy's body. On June 9th, 2020, Rexburg police and the FBI showed up at Chad's home with a search warrant. This was the second search they were conducting, but the previous one was half a year before, when the snow was covering the frozen ground. This time, they would dig Chad's back garden with ease.
I observed the evidence response recovery team and also cadaver dogs working the entire backyard. So they worked the pond area, and then they had marked off other areas inside the backyard.
Before long, the forensic team discovered fresh sod on top of rocks on top of some paneling.
As soon as they removed the paneling, I could smell the odor of a decomposing body.
JJ's decomposed body was wrapped in plastic and buried in Chad's backyard. Now, the police knew Tylee was also buried somewhere. So they went to the local pet cemetery. Almost a year ago, Chad had sent a series of very weird texts to his then wife, Tammy.
Chad says to his then alive wife, Tammy, "Well, I've had an interesting morning. I felt we should burn all of the limb debris by the fire pit before it got too soaked by the coming storms. While I did so, I spotted a big raccoon along the fence, and I hurried and got my gun, and he was still walking along. I got close enough that one shot did the trick. He's now in our pet cemetery. Fun times." That's how Chad decided to alert his wife that she might see some action around the cemetery.
Yeah. That was not a raccoon. When the forensic team dug up the cemetery, they found the dismembered body of Tylee. That day, Lori called Chad from prison.
Are you okay? The house?
Yeah.
Why are they in the house?
No, they're out in property.
Are they seizing stuff again?
It was pretty clear they both knew this was the end for their psychopathic stint. A few hours later, Chad was in custody. Finally, JJ and Tylee's family knew what had happened to them, but it was heartbreaking. The whole story is outrageous. Lori fell in love with a cult leader, took on his beliefs, and then the couple decided to kill their current partners. But what about their children? What was their motivation there? Well, they were zombies. Yeah, Lori was heard saying that both JJ and Tylee, that they were zombies. In a heartbreaking twist, Tylee herself had heard her mom talk on the phone and call her a zombie. Lori was so far gone that she didn't love her children anymore. She just saw them as evil beings who needed to go. Chad and Lori are both charged with murder, but it's unclear who exactly killed the children. Lori, Chad, and Alex were at the Rexburg residence on both occasions, Tylee's and JJ's disappearance. Anyone could be guilty, but Alex passed away, so he can't confess. And it's likely Chad and Lori will just pin the blame on him. But there's evidence that Chad buried both of them. And both his and Lori's behavior in the 11 months people were looking for the kids shows they knew what happened. Lori and Chad were a match made in hell, but all the while they preached they were the chosen ones. It's truly devastating to think so many innocent people met horrible deaths because of these two people's delusions. In April 2023, Chad and Lori will be tried separately for the murders of JJ, Tylee, and Tammy. According to the police, there is now DNA evidence that both Chad and Lori were responsible for these murders. Of course, both pleaded not guilty. Will there be enough evidence to convict the two? If they are, both Chad and Lori could face the death penalty in Idaho. But no matter their sentences, it's unlikely they will bring any closure to all the people that were left heartbroken by this horrific, outrageous story. Hey, thanks for watching. What are your thoughts on this case? Let me know in a comment, and before you go, why not like and subscribe? See you next time, and stay safe.